potentially like if we start, let's say, I don't know, digitally attacking one of these cartels and they already have embedded, cartel enterprises within the United States, which it hasn't been, that mainstream in the reporting, but there's been some light reporting on it where like they're finding, cartel safe houses in like Montana, right? And in the mountains in
Yeah,
California,
all over.
like, yeah. So they definitely have a presence, but do you think they're weighing that risk where it's like, all right, if we start attacking them over there, they could start launching attacks, like real attacks, physical attacks here. But I'm also thinking about the capabilities, right? So like what are their capabilities, right? So like it's not like they're going into a country like in Europe where they don't have a second amendment, like the cartel probably understands like, hey, there's 400 million Americans and there's like 500 million guns in America. The likelihood of having a grand successful attack, at least in my head, is fairly low. Like you may be able to make some progress in terms of that, like as dark as that probably sounds to say progress with that. But like eventually there's a citizen there that would do the right thing, or there's police there that would do the right thing, right? So what's your thoughts on that? Because there's a lot of different angles with it, and I'm probably not seeing them all or thinking of it.
No, it's and I know just because I mean this is what I did for several years at DHS. It's more like this hasn't occurred to anyone because it's just not how. I mean, for some people, like the folks I talked to who did the Silk Road case, and as well as ones since then, to them it occurs, or it occurs to them all the time. That's who I initially talked to about it. But for the most part, it doesn't, because law enforcement, by and large, is pretty kinetic. There's cyber divisions. They're, like I was saying before, they deal with cyber crime, not regular crime. The cartel is certainly, particularly the Sinaloa cartel and CJNG, the other big one in Mexico, are becoming more cyber capable. We don't worry about blowback as much with them as we would with doing it to like the Russians or the Chinese or something. So, for example, we launched this massive blitz against the cartel late in 23, where DEA rounded up a few dozen of their senior most lieutenants. The Treasury Department did sanctions against some of the Chinese chemical companies supplying them with precursor chemicals for fentanyl. State Department did a bunch of most wanted stuff to make sure their leadership couldn't travel around the world without getting arrested. And then we at DHS stood up this massive thing where we arrested literally a few thousand foot soldiers, several thousand pounds of fentanyl, et cetera, et cetera. And with that effort and subsequent waves of it, fentanyl deaths dropped by almost 40%, actually 30% a year later. But the cartels know that for them to try and attack back in kind would instigate exactly what they don't want, which is an actual invasion of Mexico, like military force being used to hunt them down and so on and so forth. And they know not to do this, largely from this incident where they killed a DEA agent named Kiki Camarena.
Yeah.
And then the kind of hellfire that got rained down on them afterwards by the U.S. government. There's now kind of an unspoken rule that they don't go after Americans. They particularly don't go after law enforcement at all. And so I think that there is a lot more we could do. So, for example, the Coast Guard. The U.S. Coast Guard is both a military organization and a law enforcement organization. One of the big things that hinders law enforcement from being able to do what NSA or Cybercom does is they don't have access to the tools. I mean, they can buy stuff, but they don't have what those guys have. But Coast Guard has the authority to work on Cybercom and NSA platforms. They also can use law enforcement authorities when they're doing it because they're also a law enforcement organization. And so they could, a lot of things need to be worked out, but you could have a small team of Coast Guard hackers sitting on Cybercom infrastructure, targeting the cartels and really wreaking havoc in ways that we have yet to do. And part of the reason we don't do it with Cybercom and NSA is because when we ask them about this, they always come back and say, okay, sure. What group of guys and gals do you want us to take off of hacking Russia, China, North Korea, and Iran to go do this? And we're like, well, none. And they're like, all right, then what are we talking about? And so, this could, there's a bunch of like bureaucratic bullshit reasons we're not doing it that could be worked out and provide much of the shock and awe that you're talking about from a cyber perspective against these guys that are killing more Americans than Vietnam or World War II did. Fentanyl kills more people than either of those, not to mention 9/11. And we just haven't done it yet. So if you were to ask me where I would hope to see offensive cyber go from a federal government perspective in the coming years, I would say I'd love to see law enforcement really step up their offensive capabilities against transnational criminal organizations, particularly the Sinaloa cartels and the Sinaloa cartel and those selling fentanyl in the U.S.
That's fascinating. I never knew that about the Coast Guard, and it's I laugh when you say that that was their response at the agencies to be like, all right, well, who do you want me to take off of these other priorities, right? Because we use the exact same logic,
Right.
in companies. It's like, oh, okay, that's great. You want me to do that? So that tool that we just spent $10 million on, who do you want me to take off of that one? Because I have 5 people working on it, and we got 2 more years worth of work. Like
Yeah.
that's like the easiest argument to either get more funding or have people leave you alone.
Yes, exactly. I know. And it was like constant, you know? We could never get around it. We'd be like eventually we at the end of the day we were begging them. We were just like, look, for whatever you guys are doing in Latin America, if anything comes up against that's cartel related or fentanyl related, will you just send it to us? Because they would through hacking the Chinese or the Russians or whoever, like periodically may come up upon stuff related to the cartels and fentanyl because a lot of that stuff intersects in different places. And it was like, can we please have your scraps? How about that? You know, but we can do better. There's ways to do better. HSI has really remarkable cyber capabilities. It's sad, like with how controversial they are right now, that they actually have probably the least or the most mission with the most public support ever, which is that they go after online child exploitation,
Yeah.
so child pornography and stuff like that,
Yeah.
which like everybody is against that. No one is against. I mean, we even work with the Chinese and the Iranians and the North Koreans on, child porn because everybody's
Yeah.
against it.
That's like the worst of the worst.
It is the worst of the worst, right? And they've built up some amazing cyber capabilities because of that mission set over the years that now could be used, for other things to go after the cartels and so on. And it isn't to the level it could be.
It's interesting. Okay, we went over time. I'm sorry about that. Do you have like 10 or 15 more
We
minutes?
started late because I had to piss, so it's fine.
Okay, so I can put half of the blame on you then. But are you good? Are you good for like another 10, 15 minutes? Because I would love to dive
Yeah, let me
more into
just look. I
fentanyl.
think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure. I always try to like stay on time, because everyone's so busy. But this is the end of my day, and my boss knows when I go live, just leave me alone. So, but you're good?
Yeah. We can keep going another 10, 15 minutes. Sure.
Okay. So with fentanyl,
We don't have to plug my book anymore. I happy to talk about it as much as you want, but I said my piece, so don't feel obligated to do that if you don't want.
no, I'm genuinely curious about it.
Sure.
So with fentanyl, can you talk about maybe what you found in terms of other countries' involvement with the cartels creating the fentanyl, lacing it, getting it over the border, like, because this is kind of the narrative that we've been told the past couple of years is that China basically sends the precursor straight over to Latin America. They sent, a whole bunch of scientists to and chemists. And the way that they make it sound is that, like, what was the extent of it that you found in your own, research with it? Like, is China's government like legitimately involved in it, or is it like a Chinese cartel that's partnering with like a Latin American cartel, or what is actually going on there? Because studying criminal justice 2010 through 2014, right? Like I think the big drug at the time was heroin, meth, and this new thing called crocodile that basically ate the skin on whatever appendage you threw, you injected it into your body, and people were like still for some reason doing it after losing an arm and everything else, right? So like those were the big things at that time. And then fentanyl kind of like just recently like came up, right?